My name is Camille Holloway, and I'm 28 years old. Last Sunday, I sat at my parents' dining table, surrounded by Wedgwood china and a $70 diptyque candle, and asked one simple question. Did you pick up my medication? The doctor said it's critical. My father set down his fork. We used that money for Chloe's new camera. It's for her future. A $4,500 camera, while my brain was slowly deteriorating from a condition they'd forced me to hide for 12 years. But here's what they didn't know. When I bought that medication myself, I triggered something none of us could stop. A pharmacist's alert, a federal investigation, and the unraveling of a $5 million secret my father had been protecting at the cost of my health. By the time dessert was served, 3 lives had changed forever, including my golden child sister, who discovered she wasn't as untouchable as she believed. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing who's listening. Now let me take you back to where it all began. To understand my family, you first need to understand the house, not just any house. A colonial revival in Westport, Connecticut, 4,500 square feet of meticulously maintained privilege. Palladian windows that caught the morning light just so. A kitchen with a sub-zero refrigerator that cost more than my first car. On the circular driveway, my father's Mercedes E-Class gleamed like a promise of respectability. The Holloways of Westport. That's how my mother introduced us at charity events and country club dinners, as if the address was part of our DNA. My father, Richard Holloway, was the kind of man who spoke in investment terms even at Thanksgiving dinner. "What's the ROI on that stuffing, Margaret?" he'd joke, and everyone would laugh because that's what you did when Richard made a joke. Former senior investment manager at a boutique firm in Greenwich. Emphasis on former, though we weren't supposed to talk about that. He wore Ralph Lauren polo like a uniform, pressed khakis, loafers without socks in summer, because that's what men of a certain class did. Every gesture calculated to project success, stability, wealth. My mother, Margaret, collected Hermes scarves the way other women collected memories. She had 17 at last count, displayed in a glass case in her closet like trophies. Her hair was highlighted every 6 weeks without fail. Her greatest fear, as far as I could tell, was what the neighbors might think. And then there was me. I lived in a studio apartment in Hartford. 400 square feet. IKEA furniture I'd assembled myself. I'd been financially independent since 22, paying my own rent, buying my own groceries, building my own life. Because in the Holloway family, love was a line item on a budget, and I had always been in the red. Then there was Chloe. My sister was 4 years younger and approximately 4 million miles more adored. 24 years old, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a tan she'd acquired on the Côte d'Azur, courtesy of our parents' credit card. Chloe's Instagram bio read visual storyteller. Her 45,000 followers watched her document a life of aesthetic perfection, café au lait in Parisian bistros, golden hour selfies on the Seine, artfully arranged charcuterie boards in her Marais apartment. The apartment our parents paid for, along with the photography classes, and the living expenses, and the flights home for holidays. She called herself a freelance photographer. The freelance part was accurate. She'd never actually been paid for her work. But Dad kept investing in her future with the same enthusiasm he'd once invested in emerging markets. Her latest acquisition, a Leica M11 camera, $9,000. Dad had presented it to her at Christmas like a coronation gift, beaming as she unwrapped it. "For your portfolio," he'd said. "This is the year, sweetheart. I can feel it." I'd watched from across the room, holding my second glass of wine, doing the math in my head. $9,000. That was 7.5 months of my medication at full price. That was a year of co-pays and specialist visits. That was everything I needed and couldn't have, wrapped in a bow for my sister. Chloe's Instagram caption that night: "Daddy knows best." My W-2 said staff accountant, $52,000 a year, 60 hours a week. No one paying my rent or funding my dreams. Chloe called my migraines attention-seeking. I called them myelin degradation. Only one of us had medical documentation, but here's what Chloe didn't know, what none of them knew. Genes don't discriminate between golden children and glass ones. I was 16 when everything should have changed. The headaches had started months earlier, blinding, nauseating episodes that left me curled in the dark for hours. Then came the balance issues. I'd stumble on flat surfaces, grab walls for support, watch the world tilt sideways without warning. After 3 neurologists and 2 MRIs, we had an answer: a hereditary myelin disorder, rare but manageable. The doctor explained it carefully, his tone gentle but direct. Early treatment is crucial, Dr. Patterson said, his pen tapping against my file. We can slow the progression significantly, but if left untreated, the damage becomes irreversible. I remember sitting in that office, my mother clutching her Chanel bag, my father's jaw tight as a fist. "What about medication?" Mom asked. "There are excellent options. We'd start with, we'll discuss it at home." Dad stood, effectively ending the appointment. "Thank you, doctor." In the car, a silver Lexus that smelled of leather and my mother's Chanel No. 5, my father delivered the verdict. "We're not going to tell anyone about this, Camille. Not friends, not extended family, no one." "But Dad," the doctor said, "the doctor said it's manageable. That means we manage it ourselves, quietly." My mother turned from the passenger seat. "You don't want people thinking there's something wrong with you, sweetheart. It'll affect your future. College applications, job prospects, everything." I was 16. I wanted them to love me. I wanted to believe they knew best, so I stayed quiet. But as we pulled into our driveway, I caught something. My father murmuring to my mother about insurance paperwork and being careful what we document. I didn't understand it then. 12 years later, I would understand everything. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I sat in Dr. Marcus Webb's office at Hartford Neurology Associates, staring at scans of my own brain illuminated on the wall-mounted display. The images looked like abstract art, swirls of gray and white that apparently told a story I didn't want to hear. Dr. Webb was kind but unflinching. Johns Hopkins diploma on the wall, cognac leather chairs, the kind of office that whispered expertise you couldn't afford to ignore. "Camille, I have to be direct with you." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. 12 years without proper treatment has allowed significant progression. The good news is, we can still intervene. The bad news is, we need to start immediately. How immediately? Yesterday would have been better. Tomorrow might be too late for optimal results. He prescribed medication, a specialized anti-inflammatory compound designed to protect the myelin sheath. The pharmacy printout listed the cost: $1,200 per month without insurance. With my company's catastrophic coverage plan, I might get it down to $340. I stared at that number. $340. Less than one shopping trip at Nordstrom for my mother. A fraction of Chloe's monthly Paris allowance. Pocket change in the Holloway world. But I didn't live in that world anymore. My checking account had $847 in it. Still, I'd promised myself I wouldn't ask them for anything. Not after how they'd treated me when I moved out at 22. Not after years of silence and disappointment. But this was my brain. My future. My life. So I swallowed my pride and called my mother, asking if they could buy my medication as an early birthday gift. She said she'd discuss it with Dad. I didn't know that prescription would ignite a fuse no one could extinguish. 3 days later, my mother called. "Camille, darling." Her voice had that particular sweetness she reserved for requests disguised as invitations. "We're having Sunday lunch this week. A proper family gathering. Chloe's home from Paris, and you know how rare it is to have everyone together." I did know. I also knew that everyone together usually meant everyone celebrating Chloe while I tried to make myself small enough to avoid criticism. "I'm not sure, Mom. Work has been—" "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's one afternoon. We'll have the good china out. I'm making my herb-roasted turkey." The good china. The Wedgwood collection that had been in the family for 3 generations, brought out for Christmas, Easter, and apparently prodigal daughter homecomings. I hesitated. Maybe this was an opportunity. Maybe I could bring up the medication in person, remind them of my request, make them see me sitting right there, needing help. Fine, I said. I'll come. Wonderful. Oh, and sweetheart? Her voice dropped half an octave. Let's not bring up any unpleasant topics, all right? No talk about, you know, the health things. Chloe's been under so much pressure with her portfolio, and we don't want to dampen the mood. The health things. As if my deteriorating nervous system was a faux pas on par with discussing politics at dinner. Sure, Mom. Perfect. 1 o'clock. Don't be late. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my tiny apartment, phone still in hand, and made myself a promise. I would ask about the medication, directly, calmly. I would not let them brush me aside this time. I should have known. In the Holloway family, invitations always came with conditions. And so did Sunday lunch. I pulled into the circular driveway at 12:55, giving myself 5 minutes to breathe. The house looked the same as always. Pristine white columns, perfectly manicured boxwoods, the kind of curb appeal that made real estate agents weep with joy. But I noticed something new. A different Mercedes in Dad's spot. The latest E-Class model, judging by the body style. Apparently, the old one had been insufficiently impressive. Fresh flowers flanked the entrance, white hydrangeas, my mother's signature. The message was clear: we are still thriving, we are still the Holloways of Westport. Chloe opened the door before I could ring the bell. Camille! She air-kissed both my cheeks, European style, as if 18 months in Paris had transformed her into someone who did that naturally. She wore a Reformation dress. I recognized the brand from her Instagram posts. And her golden skin glowed with that particular radiance that comes from having no responsibilities and unlimited funds. You look the same, she said, eyeing my Target cardigan with barely concealed judgment. Thanks, you look expensive. She laughed like I'd paid her a compliment. Wait until you see what Daddy just got me. Canon R5 Mark II. For my portfolio expansion, there are Paris galleries interested. She held up the camera like a trophy. I did the math automatically, the way you do when you've spent your life calculating what you can't afford. $4,500, nearly 4 months of my medication. That's great, Chloe. I know, right? Daddy always knows exactly what I need. She bounced toward the dining room, camera in hand, leaving me in the foyer with my practical handbag and my racing heart. Daddy always knows exactly what I need. I wondered if she'd still believe that by the time dessert was served. The house had been renovated since my last visit. Mom mentioned it casually as she guided me through the new layout. Just a little refresh, nothing major. But the new kitchen alone must have cost 6 figures. Marble countertops, custom cabinetry, a wine fridge that probably held more value in bottles than my entire apartment's contents. Bathroom's been moved, by the way, Mom said, waving vaguely toward the back hallway. Through Richard's study now, such a better flow. When I needed to wash my hands before lunch, I followed her directions. Through the study, second door on the left. Dad's study. I'd avoided this room my entire childhood. It had always felt like enemy territory, lined with financial magazines and the particular silence of a man who preferred numbers to conversation. The door was ajar. I stepped inside. His laptop sat open on the mahogany desk, screen still bright. He must have just stepped away. I wasn't snooping, I was simply passing through, but the words on the screen caught my eye like a flare in the darkness. Pacific Mutual Life Insurance. Subject line: Policy, MAR PMU 77493882, Disclosure Inquiry. My heart stopped. Disclosure. Inquiry. And a policy number I'd never seen before. Before I could read more, footsteps sounded behind me. What are you doing in here? Dad's voice was sharp, sharper than I'd heard it in years. He moved past me with unusual speed, snapping the laptop closed in one fluid motion. Looking for the bathroom, I said. Mom said it's through here now. His eyes held mine for a moment. Something flickered there. Anger, yes, but something else. Fear? Second door on the left, he said flatly. I nodded and walked away, but I didn't forget what I'd seen. Disclosure inquiry. I didn't know what it meant, not yet. The dining room was a stage set for family perfection. Wedgwood china arranged with military precision, crystal glasses catching the afternoon light, a diptyque candle, $70 of French fragrance, flickering beside the centerpiece. In the corner, a Bose speaker murmured classical music, Vivaldi or something equally appropriate for the performance my mother was directing. The turkey gleamed. The wine flowed. Conversation orbited around Chloe like she was the sun and we were merely planets in her gravity. The Galerie Lefebvre is very interested, Chloe was saying, gesturing with her fork. They said my eye for composition is très extraordinaire. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom beamed. I always knew you had a gift. I sat quietly through the appetizer, through the salad, through 20 minutes of Chloe's Parisian adventures and Dad's proud interjections about her brand development. Finally, during a pause between courses, I spoke. Mom, Dad, did you get a chance to pick up my prescription? I kept my voice calm, neutral. The one I called about? Dr. Webb said it's really important I start immediately. Silence descended like a curtain. Dad set down his knife and fork. The clink against the Wedgwood sounded unnaturally loud. We discussed it, he said. The timing wasn't right. What do you mean, timing? We used that money for Chloe's new camera. He didn't look at me. It's for her future, Camille. Her career is finally taking off. The camera. The $4,500 camera I'd seen in the foyer. Mom jumped in, her voice honeyed with false comfort. You can wait until next month, can't you, sweetheart? You've always managed before. I looked around the table, at the crystal, the china, the turkey, the sister with the new camera. And I said, very quietly, did you check the alert note the pharmacist sent? Mom's fork stopped midair. Alert? The word hung in the air between us. Alert, I repeated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. When a patient with a critical condition doesn't pick up their prescribed medication, the pharmacy flags it, especially for neurological conditions, especially when the prescription has been submitted multiple times without being filled. I watched my father's hand tighten around his napkin, white knuckles against white linen. I don't know what you're talking about, Mom said, but her voice had climbed half an octave. The pharmacist sent a notification, standard procedure under federal guidelines for dependent adults with serious medical conditions. I didn't break eye contact with my father. They call it a mandatory reporting situation when there's a pattern suggesting medical neglect. Dad's jaw clenched. You're not a dependent. You're 28 years old. I'm on your insurance, Dad. Or I was, technically, until I turned 26. But the pharmacy records show a pattern going back years. Prescriptions ordered by doctors and never filled. Medications recommended and never purchased. Chloe looked between us, her camera forgotten. What is she talking about? Nothing. Dad's voice was ice. Your sister is being dramatic, as usual. I bought the medication myself, I continued, last week, with my own money. The pharmacy flagged the irregularity, patient filling their own prescription after years of family contact information being primary. That triggers questions. Mom had gone pale. Actually pale, not the fashionable pallor of her spa facials. Questions from whom? Adult Protective Services, insurance investigators. I tilted my head slightly. Maybe you should check your mail. Dad's face changed. Not guilt, something colder. Calculation. He was running numbers, assessing damage, the way he'd done in boardrooms for decades. Camille, he said slowly, what exactly have you done? I took care of myself. Something you should have done 12 years ago. Dad pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood with an ugly sound. This is exactly what we were afraid of. He pointed at me, and for a moment I saw the investment manager who had intimidated junior analysts into silence. This is why we didn't want anyone knowing. You've always been determined to make yourself the victim, to make this family look bad. Richard, Mom's voice was warning. No, Margaret. She needs to hear this. He turned his full attention on me. Do you have any idea what you've potentially cost us? What this could do to our reputation, to Chloe's prospects? I remained seated, calm. I'd spent 12 years being small, and I was done. I asked for medication, I said. You said no, so I got it myself. That's not making you look bad, Dad. That's surviving. Oh, please. Chloe rolled her eyes right on cue. You've always been like this. Always sick, always needing special attention. Some of us are actually building careers. Chloe, you've never had a paying client. Her mouth dropped open. Mom jumped in with the familiar guilt trip script. Camille, you're ruining a perfectly lovely family lunch. Chloe just got home. Can't you just be happy for your sister for once instead of making everything about your issues? My issues. 12 years of progressive nerve damage reduced to issues. I'm not making this about anything, I said. I asked one question. You chose to prioritize a camera over my medication. Those are facts. Facts, Dad laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want facts? The fact is you've always looked for reasons to feel sorry for yourself. This condition of yours was diagnosed by 3 neurologists. Would you like to see the brain scans? Silence. I didn't think so. I placed my napkin on the table, slowly, deliberately. The classical music kept playing, some ironic Mozart piece about joy and celebration, as I pushed back my chair and stood. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I asked a simple question about medication I need to protect my brain. I have my answer. Sit down. Dad's voice was command mode now, the tone he'd used my entire childhood. We're not finished. I am. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they filled the room. Chloe stared. Mom's hand fluttered to her pearls. Dad's face reddened. You don't get to walk away from this family whenever things get uncomfortable, Camille. I'm not walking away because I'm uncomfortable. I picked up my bag, my practical Target bag that probably cost less than their table setting. I'm walking away because you've given me your answer. Chloe's camera was more important than my medication. I'll handle it myself, like I handle everything else. You're being ridiculous. I'm being clear. I looked at each of them in turn, my father with his calculation, my mother with her willful blindness, my sister with her confusion. I asked for help. You said no. Now I know where I stand. I've always known, I suppose. I just needed to hear it out loud. I walked toward the foyer. Behind me I could hear Mom's whispered, Richard, do something. And Dad's frustrated exhale. At the front door, I paused. Thank you for lunch. The door closed behind me. Quiet, like a period at the end of a sentence. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I was past crying about this family. I just didn't know yet that buying my own medication had started a countdown no one could stop. And right here, I want to pause. Because I know some of you have been Camille. You've asked for something you genuinely needed, really needed, and been told your siblings' wants mattered more. If that's you, drop a comment. Tell me, did you walk away like I did, or did you stay and fight? I read every single comment. Now let me tell you what happened next, because this was only the beginning. The drive back to Hartford took 90 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone, just drove through the October afternoon, watching the wealthy suburbs of Fairfield County give way to the more honest landscape of central Connecticut. My studio apartment was exactly as I'd left it, 400 square feet of independence, a bed that folded against the wall, an IKEA desk where I did my work, a window that looked out onto a parking lot instead of a manicured garden. But it was mine. Every square inch paid for with my own money, my own labor, my own stubborn refusal to crawl back to people who saw me as a liability. I sat on my bed and opened my banking app. $847. The medication cost $1,200 without insurance. But I'd done my research. There was a patient assistance program through the manufacturer. Income-based pricing. If I qualified, I could get it down to $380. I spent 2 hours that night filling out forms, uploading tax returns, documenting my income, my expenses, my complete financial vulnerability laid bare for a pharmaceutical company's review. At 11 p.m., I submitted the application. By Tuesday, I had an answer. Approved. Wednesday morning, I drove to the CVS on Farmington Avenue and picked up my first real prescription in 12 years. The pharmacist, a woman named Linda, with kind eyes and efficient hands, handed me the bag with a small smile. First time filling this yourself? First time in a long time. She nodded like she understood more than I was saying. I didn't know it then, but Linda had already noted something in her system. A flag. A pattern. A question that would soon become an investigation. I just thought I was finally taking care of myself. I had no idea what I'd set in motion. A week passed without a single call from my family. I told myself this was fine. Expected, even. The Holloways didn't apologize. They simply waited for the offending party to come back, contrite and grateful for readmission to the fold. But I wasn't coming back. Not this time. I checked Chloe's Instagram once, just once, and found exactly what I expected. A photo from Sunday brunch at the Westport Country Club. Mom, Dad, and Chloe arranged artfully around a table laden with mimosas and eggs Benedict. Caption: My people. 3 people. No empty chair. No acknowledgement of a fourth family member. Just my people, as if I'd never existed at all. My mother's only communication came via text message, 5 days after the lunch. When you're ready to apologize for ruining Chloe's homecoming, let me know. I didn't respond. At work, my colleague Sarah asked about my weekend, the way people do. Family stuff, I said. Complicated. She nodded sympathetically. Everyone's family was complicated. No one needed details. But something was different now. Each morning I took my medication, a small white pill that represented 12 years of being told I didn't need it. Each day the headaches that had plagued me for months grew slightly less intense. The dizziness became less frequent. I was getting better. Actually better. For the first time since I was 16 years old. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had spent over a decade convincing me my condition wasn't serious enough to treat. Now, treating it was proving them wrong with every symptom that faded. I thought the story ended here. Me, alone but functional. Them, pretending I didn't exist. I was wrong. Because 3 weeks after that Sunday lunch, my phone rang with a call I never expected. The caller ID showed a New Haven number I hadn't seen in years. Camille, it's your Aunt Evelyn. Evelyn Holloway, my father's younger sister, the family black sheep, or at least, she had been until I claimed that title. A family law attorney who'd cut ties with my father years ago over what she'd called fundamental differences in values. I hadn't spoken to her since my grandmother's funeral. Aunt Evelyn, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. Her voice was warm but direct, the voice of someone who spent her days navigating courtrooms. I heard something interesting today, and I thought you should know about it. Heard from who? Linda Torres, the pharmacist at the CVS on Farmington Avenue. She used to be a client of mine, helped her with a custody matter years ago. A pause. She mentioned a young woman named Holloway filling a prescription that had some irregularities in the history. My stomach tightened. Irregularities? Camille, do you understand what happens when a pharmacy identifies a pattern of medical neglect for an adult with a serious condition? Not exactly. Federal guidelines require mandatory reporting in certain situations, when prescriptions are written repeatedly and never filled. When a patient suddenly has to obtain their own medication after years of family contacts being primary. It raises flags. I sat down heavily on my bed. What kind of flags? Adult Protective Services flags. Insurance investigation flags. Her voice softened. You triggered an investigation, Camille, just by taking care of yourself. The room seemed to tilt slightly, though whether that was my condition or my shock I couldn't tell. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't, but I think your father knows this was coming, and I think you deserve to understand why. Why what? Why he never let you get treated. What do you know about your father's life insurance policy? The question seemed to come from nowhere. Nothing. I haven't been part of family finances since I moved out. That's what I thought. Evelyn's voice carried the weight of someone about to deliver difficult news. Richard has a policy with Pacific Mutual Life Insurance, $5 million. You, Chloe, and your mother are named as beneficiaries. $5 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Okay. These policies have disclosure requirements, Camille. When you apply, you have to declare any hereditary conditions in the family, any genetic predispositions, any diagnosed conditions that might affect life expectancy or health outcomes. The pieces began clicking together. Slowly at first, then all at once. If I was officially treated for my condition, it would be documented in medical records, records that insurance companies can access during claims or audits. Evelyn paused. Your father applied for this policy about 3 years after your diagnosis, a $5 million death benefit. The premiums alone are $15,000 to $20,000 annually. $15,000 a year, for over a decade. That was nearly $200,000 my father had invested in keeping his policy valid. $200,000 in premiums versus $340 a month for my medication. The math was devastating in its clarity. He didn't refuse to treat me because it was expensive, I said slowly. He refused because treating me would invalidate his policy. That's my understanding, yes. 12 years. 12 years of being called dramatic. 12 years of watching my nervous system degrade. 12 years of, you don't really need medication, and let's not tell anyone. All to protect $5 million. Evelyn, I managed, what do I do now? You don't have to do anything. The investigation is already in motion. That night, I became a researcher. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness of my studio apartment as I dove into the world of life insurance fraud. Legal databases, consumer protection websites, news articles about policies voided for non-disclosure. What I found made my stomach turn. Under the Insurance Fraud Prevention Act, intentionally concealing a known condition to maintain a policy wasn't just grounds for cancellation, it could be criminal. The word they used was material misrepresentation. Fancy legal language for lying about something important. The consequences were clear. Policy voided immediately upon discovery. No refund of premiums paid. Potential criminal investigation for fraud. Civil liability for any parties involved in the concealment. But there was more. Many life insurance policies with hereditary condition clauses had a specific provision. If one child was diagnosed with a genetic condition, all biological children could be required to undergo genetic testing. I read that paragraph 3 times. All biological children. Chloe, the golden child. The one who'd never had a sick day. The one who'd called my migraines attention-seeking and dismissed my symptoms as drama. If my condition was officially documented, which it now was thanks to my prescription, Chloe might be required to test for the same gene. And genes, as I'd learned the hard way, don't discriminate between the child who's cherished and the child who's overlooked. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. For 12 years, I'd been the family secret, the flaw they needed to hide, the liability on their balance sheet. Now, that secret was unraveling, not because I'd exposed it, but because I'd simply done what any person should be able to do: seek medical care. The irony was almost poetic. I'd been the math problem my father couldn't solve. Now I was doing the math myself. I met Evelyn 3 days later at a coffee shop in New Haven. She'd suggested it. Neutral ground, she said. Away from Hartford, away from Westport. A small, indie place with exposed brick and mismatched chairs, the kind of establishment my mother would have dismissed as trying too hard. Evelyn looked like a softer version of my father, if you scrubbed away the calculation. Same bone structure, same sharp eyes, but hers held warmth where his held ledgers. Before we talk, I need you to understand something. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I can't represent you legally. Conflict of interest. I'm still technically family. But I can explain what's happening, and I can recommend colleagues if you need representation. I don't want to sue anyone. I just want to understand. She nodded. The investigation from Adult Protective Services will proceed regardless of what you want. That's how mandatory reporting works. Once the pharmacy flagged the pattern, it entered the system. So I didn't start this. You didn't start anything except taking care of yourself. Her gaze was steady. The system is designed to catch exactly this situation. Adults who are being denied necessary medical care, especially when there might be financial motivation. What happens next? They'll request records from your doctors, from the pharmacy, from your parents' insurance company. She paused. If they find what I suspect they'll find, your father is going to face some very difficult questions. I thought about the email I'd glimpsed on his laptop. Disclosure inquiry. He already knows something's coming. Evelyn's expression confirmed it. Richard has always been good at seeing threats on the horizon. The question is whether he saw this one in time. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens next, Camille, you didn't do anything wrong. Remember that. The call from my mother came 2 weeks later. I was at my desk at work, entering quarterly figures, when my personal phone buzzed with a number I'd learned to dread. The Westport landline. Mom only used it for calls she wanted on the record. Camille. Her voice was trembling. There are people here, from the government. They're asking about you. Adult Protective Services? A sharp intake of breath. What did you tell them? I didn't tell anyone anything, Mom. I bought medication I needed, that's all. Well, someone is telling them something, because they're here, in my living room, asking about your medical history, about prescriptions, about why... Her voice cracked. They're asking why we never filled your prescriptions, Camille. I closed my eyes. Part of me had hoped this moment would feel like vindication. Instead, it just felt tired. Because you didn't, I said quietly. That's the answer. You didn't fill them because you chose not to. That's not... It's more complicated than... Is it? Silence on the line. I could hear muffled voices in the background, the investigators probably, continuing their work while my mother tried to manage me. You need to come here, she said finally. You need to tell them this is a misunderstanding, that you're fine, that we've always taken care of you. I'm not going to lie for you, Mom. This isn't about lying, Camille. This is about family, about protecting. Protecting what? I kept my voice level. The same thing Dad's been protecting for 12 years? Whatever that policy is worth? The silence that followed told me everything. You know, she whispered. I know enough. She hung up without saying goodbye. I returned to my spreadsheet. The numbers, at least, never lied. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, Patricia Reeves from Adult Protective Services contacted me directly. She was professional, thorough, and entirely uninterested in family drama. She wanted facts. I gave them. Dates of doctor's appointments, names of neurologists who'd written prescriptions, the timeline of my diagnosis, my denial of treatment, my eventual self-rescue. Then she told me something I hadn't anticipated. We've requested documentation from Pacific Mutual Life Insurance as part of our investigation, she said. When there's potential financial motivation for medical neglect, we're required to examine it. And? Your father has been in communication with Pacific Mutual for several years regarding disclosure requirements. We've obtained copies of that correspondence. My mouth went dry. What kind of correspondence? Ms. Reeves consulted her notes. 3 years ago, your father sent an inquiry to the company. Hypothetical question about what would happen if a dependent was diagnosed with a hereditary condition after a policy was signed. What did they say? That it would need to be disclosed. That failure to disclose could void the policy. She looked up. He wrote back thanking them, stating, and I quote, "Just a hypothetical question. No such diagnosis exists." I felt the room tilt. Not my condition this time, just the weight of confirmation. He knew, I said. He asked specifically, and they told him, and he lied anyway. The emails are timestamped 18 months after your original diagnosis. Ms. Reeves's voice was carefully neutral. He knew exactly what the policy required. He chose not to comply. 3 years of hiding me. 12 years of letting me suffer. All for a policy he'd been warned he was violating. The emails proved what I'd always suspected. It wasn't neglect, it was strategy. Now I want to ask you something. If you found out your parent chose money over your health, not once, not twice, but every single day for 12 years, what would you do? Would you forgive them, expose them, walk away forever? Comment below, and hit subscribe if you want to see how this ends. Because trust me, what happened next changed everything. And not just for me. The letter from Pacific Mutual arrived at my parents' house 4 days later. I know because Evelyn called me the moment she heard. "They're invoking Section 14.2, she said. Hereditary condition disclosure. It's standard language, but it has teeth. What does it mean? It means once one biological child is confirmed to have a hereditary condition, which you now officially do, all biological children may be required to undergo genetic testing as part of the policy review." The implications hit me like cold water. Chloe has to test. If they want to maintain any hope of the policy surviving, which they don't, but they might not know that yet, yes, Chloe has to be tested. I thought about my sister, her Instagram life, her Parisian dreams, her absolute certainty that she was the healthy one, the successful one, the one who'd escaped the family curse of being me. An hour later, my phone rang. Not Mom this time. Dad. "You've destroyed this family." His voice was ice and venom combined. "Are you happy now?" "I bought medication I needed." "Don't give me that. You knew exactly what would happen. You planned this." "I planned to not have permanent brain damage, Dad. That's all I planned." "Chloe has to be tested now. Do you understand? Your sister, who has done nothing wrong, has to undergo genetic testing because of you." I let his words hang in the air before responding. "Because of me? Or because you lied on an insurance application 12 years ago?" Silence. "I didn't make you hide my diagnosis," I continued. "I didn't make you prioritize a policy over my health. I didn't make you lie to the insurance company. You did all of that. I just stopped hiding for you." He hung up. The golden child wasn't immune to genetics. None of us were. The summons came 3 days later. Mom's voice on the phone was different this time. Not angry, not accusatory. Afraid. "We need to talk," she said. "All of us. Sunday. Please, Camille. I don't think more family lunches are going to help. Your grandparents will be there." That stopped me. Grandpa Gerald and Grandma Helen, my mother's parents, the ones who'd helped fund my parents' lifestyle for years without, apparently, knowing what that lifestyle was built on. Why? "Because your father has some explaining to do. To everyone." Mom's voice cracked. "And because I think we all need to hear the truth, whatever that is." I called Evelyn that night. "If you go," she said, "go with the truth. Don't go to negotiate. Don't go to apologize. Just tell them what happened and let them decide what to do with it." "Do you think I should go?" "I think you've spent 12 years being invisible in that family. Maybe it's time they actually saw you." Sunday arrived gray and cold, the kind of November afternoon that suited difficult conversations. I drove to Westport with my facts organized in my head and my emotions locked somewhere I couldn't access them. The house looked the same, white columns, manicured boxwoods, but something felt different. The Mercedes in the driveway, the silence of the property. No, not just silence, tension. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Inside, I found them arranged like a tableau. Mom and Dad on one sofa, Chloe in a chair, and my grandparents, Grandpa Gerald with his Breitling watch, Grandma Helen with her concerned eyes, on the restoration hardware sectional. Everyone looked at me when I walked in. Grandpa spoke first. Someone needs to explain to me what the hell is going on. It was time for the truth. I took the only empty seat, a straight-backed chair that faced the rest of them like a witness stand. The room was exactly as I remembered: marble fireplace, original artwork, the kind of careful elegance that whispered generational wealth. My grandparents had helped furnish this room. They'd loaned money for this house. They'd believed in the family that lived here. "Gerald," my father started, "this is really a private matter between—" "Private?" Grandpa's voice cut like steel. "Insurance investigators contacted my daughter. Adult Protective Services is involved. My granddaughter apparently has a medical condition no one told us about." His gaze swept the room. "That stopped being private some time ago." Mom twisted her hands in her lap. Chloe stared at her phone. Dad's jaw worked silently. "Someone start talking," Grandma Helen said. "Right now." "Camille is exaggerating the situation." Dad attempted to regain control, that boardroom voice I knew so well. "She has a minor condition that she's blown out of proportion." "Richard," Evelyn's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't known she was coming, but there she was, my father's estranged sister, still in her coat. "I think you should let Camille speak." Dad's face reddened. "What are you doing here?" "Helen invited me." Evelyn moved to stand near my grandparents. "Family meeting, isn't it?" The room recalibrated. I watched my father realize he was outnumbered, saw the calculation in his eyes shift toward damage control. Grandpa turned to me. "Camille, what happened?" 12 years of silence pressed against my chest. 12 years of being invisible, of being the problem, of being told my reality wasn't real. I looked at my grandfather, a man who'd always sent birthday cards, who'd asked about my work, who'd never treated me like a burden. "Grandpa," I said quietly, "let me tell you about when I was 16. When I was 16, I was diagnosed with a hereditary neurological condition." The words came out steady, clear. 12 years of practice at staying calm. "The doctors said it was manageable with early treatment. They wanted to start medication immediately." I paused. "Mom and Dad refused. They told me never to tell anyone. They said it would hurt my future." Grandma's hand went to her mouth. "Richard? Margaret? Is this true?" My mother started to speak, but Dad cut her off with a raised hand. "The situation was more nuanced than she's describing." "Was it?" I didn't raise my voice. "The doctors prescribed medication. You didn't buy it. For 12 years. Last month, Dr. Webb told me the damage was progressing because of delayed treatment. I asked you to help pay for my prescription. You spent the money on Chloe's new camera instead." Chloe looked up sharply. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't." I met her eyes. "But they did." Grandpa leaned forward. "Richard, why would you deny your daughter medical treatment?" And there it was. The question no one had asked in 12 years. "Because of the insurance," I said, when my father didn't answer. "Dad has a $5 million life insurance policy. If I was officially diagnosed and treated, it would have to be disclosed. The policy could be voided." The color drained from Grandpa's face. "You let your daughter suffer for a policy." "Gerald, you don't understand the financial pressures. I gave you $400,000 after your investment setback." Grandpa's voice had gone quiet, which was somehow worse than shouting. "You said you'd pay it back. You said you were getting things under control." Mom started crying silently. Dad said nothing. "He chose $5 million over my brain," I said. "The emails with the insurance company prove he knew exactly what he was doing." The room erupted. "You've been lying to us for years," Grandpa said, his voice shaking now. "Not just about Camille, about everything. The loan, the money situation, all of it. You don't understand the position I was in." Dad's mask was slipping, desperation leaking through the executive composure. "After the investment loss, that policy was our safety net, our only asset that—" "Your only asset?" Grandma's gentle voice turned sharp. "You live in $1 million home, you drive a new Mercedes every 2 years, you sent Chloe to Paris on an 18-month vacation." That was an investment in her career. An investment. Grandpa stood, and suddenly he looked every bit the retired CEO he'd been. "You used my money, my family's money, to fund a lifestyle while denying your daughter medical care, and you have the audacity to call it an investment strategy." Evelyn stepped forward. "The insurance company has already begun their review. The policy will likely be voided due to fraudulent non-disclosure. There may be additional consequences." "Consequences?" Mom's voice was barely audible. "What consequences?" "Insurance fraud investigation, possible civil liability. Depending on what the APS investigation concludes, there could be more." Chloe suddenly spoke, her voice high and frightened. "Wait, if she has a hereditary condition, and I have to test—" She looked at our parents. "Did you ever think about what would happen to me? What if I have it too?" Mom reached for her. "Sweetheart, you're healthy." "But it's genetic." Chloe pulled away. "You knew this was genetic and you never thought to test me? You just hoped it would skip me?" Dad had no answer. Neither did Mom. "You protected the policy," Chloe said slowly, understanding dawning. "Not us. Never us." The golden child was finally seeing the bars of her cage. Grandpa's next words were quiet, but they carried the weight of verdict. "This meeting is over. Richard, Margaret, Helen and I will be in contact with our attorneys. I expect that loan to be addressed immediately." "Gerald, please." Mom stood, reaching out. "Don't." He moved toward me instead, placing a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Camille, why didn't you tell us? Years ago?" I looked up at him. This man who'd been kind to me at holidays, who'd sent cards and asked questions, who'd never known what was happening in his own family. "I was 16, Grandpa. They told me not to tell anyone. I didn't know I had a choice." Something crumpled in his face. Not pity, recognition. The recognition of a man who understood manipulation, who'd built a career on reading people, and who was realizing he'd missed the signs in his own family. "You always have a choice," he said softly. "I'm sorry no one told you that." Grandma came to my other side, taking my hand. "We'll make this right, whatever that looks like." I stood, looking at my parents one final time. Dad stood by the fireplace, diminished somehow, smaller than he'd ever seemed. Mom wept silently on the sofa. Chloe sat frozen, her perfect life shattered around her like broken glass. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said. "I came because you asked me to, because Grandpa and Grandma deserve the truth." I picked up my bag. "I'm not going to apologize for taking care of myself. I'm not going to fix this for you, and I'm not coming back to ask to be seen anymore." I walked toward the door. "Camille!" Mom's voice, broken. I turned. "You called me the glass child, but I didn't shatter. Your house did." I left them in the ruins. The investigation concluded 6 weeks later. Patricia Reeves called me with the findings on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice professionally neutral, despite delivering what amounted to a demolition report. "Adult Protective Services has completed its review," she said. "We've documented a pattern of medical neglect motivated by financial considerations. While you're now an independent adult, which limits certain interventions, the findings have been shared with relevant agencies." What does that mean practically? "Pacific Mutual Life Insurance has voided your father's policy. $5 million. Gone. Additionally, all premiums paid over the past decade are forfeit. No refunds." I did the math automatically. 15 to 20,000 a year for over 10 years. That was somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 paid into nothing. Is there more? The insurance company has referred the case to their fraud division. Your father made specific false statements in writing regarding family medical conditions. Depending on their investigation, there could be civil or criminal liability. I sat with that for a moment. Criminal liability. For my father, the respectable Richard Holloway of Westport. Is there anything I need to do? You've already done it, Ms. Reeves said. You told the truth. You sought treatment you needed. Everything else was already in motion. After I hung up, I sat in my small apartment and looked around at my IKEA furniture, my folding bed, my practical life. My father had spent 12 years protecting $5 million he would never see. He'd spent 15 years of premiums on a policy that no longer existed. He'd sacrificed my health, my childhood, my trust, all for money that evaporated the moment someone told the truth. I thought about revenge, about vindication, about justice. What I felt instead was something simpler: freedom. The call from Chloe came on a Saturday morning. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken since the family meeting. No texts, no Instagram messages, nothing. The golden child had retreated into silence, and I hadn't pursued her. But something made me pick up. Camille? Her voice was small, nothing like the confident social media personality I'd watched from afar for years. I got my test results. I knew before she said another word. Positive. The word cracked in her throat. I carry the gene. The doctor said it might never manifest, or it might start showing symptoms in my 30s or 40s. They can't predict. I sat down slowly. Whatever satisfaction I might have expected to feel, the vindication of the overlooked sister, wasn't there. Just a strange, hollow ache. I'm sorry, Chloe. Are you? A bitter laugh. Because I spent years calling you dramatic, telling you to stop seeking attention, and the whole time, we had the same genes. Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, uneven. They never tested me, she finally said. Mom and Dad. They knew this was hereditary, and they never once thought to check if I had it too. They just hoped. They were protecting the policy, not us. I know, her voice broke. I know that now, but I kept thinking I was the favorite, the one they invested in, the one they loved more. A shuddering breath. And they would have let me develop symptoms without warning, let me think I was going crazy, just like they let you think you were dramatic. Yes, I said quietly. They would have. Camille, I'm sorry. For everything I said. For the way I treated you. It wasn't absolution, it wasn't a relationship rebuilt, but it was a start. I know you are. Grandpa Gerald didn't waste time. He called me 1 week after Chloe's diagnosis, his voice carrying that particular steadiness of a man who'd made difficult decisions before and wasn't afraid of one more. Your grandmother and I have been talking, he said. We've made some changes. Changes? We're revising our estate plan. Richard and Margaret are no longer beneficiaries. I gripped the phone tighter. Grandpa, you don't have to. This isn't about rewarding you and punishing them, Camille. This is about consequences. His voice softened. When your grandmother and I built our family, we believed certain things about what that meant. Integrity, honesty, protecting each other. What your father did, what your mother enabled. That's not what we built. I didn't know what to say. We've also demanded repayment of the $400,000 we loaned them, he continued. They can sell the house if necessary. That's their problem to solve. They'll have to downsize. Significantly. Yes, they will. No sympathy in his voice. Just fact. But they'll be alive. They'll be healthy. More than they gave you for 12 years. Grandma took the phone then, her voice warm despite everything. Camille, we're so sorry. We should have seen it. Should have asked more questions. We trusted our own daughter to do right by her children. You couldn't have known. Maybe not, but we know now, She paused. Our new estate plan leaves everything directly to you and Chloe. With a condition for Chloe, she needs to establish independent employment within 2 years. No more funding her finding herself. I almost laughed. Almost. And you, sweetheart, Grandma added. You call us any time, for anything. You're not alone in this family, you never were. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack in my chest. Not pain, hope. The final call from my father came on a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, a simple pasta, nothing special, when his number appeared. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Camille? His voice was different, softer, careful. The voice of a man who'd finally realized he wasn't in control. Dad, I've been thinking about everything, and I know I made mistakes. Mistakes. The word tasted bitter. Choices, then. Choices that hurt you. And He paused, and I could almost hear him trying to calculate the right words. I'm sorry. For all of it. I stirred my pasta. Waited. Your grandparents are being very harsh, he continued. The loan repayment, the estate changes, it's going to devastate us, Camille. Your mother is beside herself. We might lose the house. There it was. The reason for the call. Not the apology, the ask. What are you hoping I'll do, Dad? If you could just talk to them, tell them we've learned our lesson, that the family should stick together, that... Dad, I turned off the stove. You spent 12 years letting me suffer to protect a $5 million policy. You looked me in the eye and told me I was being dramatic while my nervous system was degrading. You chose a camera for Chloe over medication for me. Silence. And now you want me to rescue you? Camille. No. The word was simple. Final. I spent my whole childhood trying to earn love you were never going to give me. I'm done. You don't understand the position we're in. I understand perfectly. I just don't owe you a solution. I paused. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up before he could respond. My pasta was slightly overcooked. I ate it anyway, in my small apartment, surrounded by my own things. It tasted like freedom. 6 months later, the glass house had shattered completely. The Westport property sold in February, not for what my parents had hoped, but for enough to pay back Grandpa and cover the mounting legal fees. They moved to a condominium in Stamford, 2 bedrooms, no columns, no circular driveway. The Mercedes was traded for a Honda. Mom's Hermes collection was edited, as she put it, sold on consignment to cover credit card debts no one had known about. Dad found work eventually, not as a senior investment manager, but as a financial consultant at a small firm in Bridgeport. Entry level, essentially. A man starting over at 58. Mom never fully forgave me, or claimed she didn't. But her occasional texts had shifted from demands for apologies to something more like acknowledgement. Not warmth, not love, but recognition that I existed. Chloe came back from Paris for good. She got a job as a barista while taking night classes at a community college for actual photography credentials. She was learning to make her own coffee, pay her own rent, build her own life. We texted sometimes, not like sisters, not yet, but like 2 people who'd survived the same storm and were still figuring out what that meant. They really loved the idea of us, she wrote once late at night. The perfect family. Just not us, the actual us. I didn't know how to respond to that, because she was right. They'd built a glass house and called us glass children, too fragile, too troublesome, too real for the fantasy they wanted. They'd polished the windows and hidden the cracks and hoped no one would notice what was breaking inside. But glass houses can't survive the truth. And I was done being invisible. The house shattered. I was still standing. My apartment is still 400 square feet. But it feels different now. Bigger somehow, though nothing has changed about the dimensions. Maybe because it's filled with different things. A small succulent plant on the windowsill, the first thing I bought after the investigation concluded. Something alive that I could take care of. Something that thrived because I chose to nurture it. A framed photograph on my desk. Me with Grandma and Grandpa at their house in Madison, taken last Christmas. The first holiday I'd spent being genuinely seen. A weekly pill organizer on my bathroom counter, filled and visible. No more hiding. No more shame about needing medication to stay healthy. I still work as an accountant. Still put in my hours, pay my bills, live within my means. But I also started therapy. Not to fix what's broken in me, but to process what was broken around me. You spent 12 years being told your reality wasn't real, my therapist said once. That's a lot to unlearn. She's right. It is a lot. But every morning I wake up and I take my medication and I remember that I'm still here, that my brain is healing instead of deteriorating, that I chose myself when no one else would. My family used to call me the glass child, too fragile, too burdensome, too much. But I didn't shatter. I just stopped pretending the cracks weren't there. And when the house came down, I was already gone, already whole, already free. That's what they never understood about glass. It's transparent, not weak. I'm telling you this story, but I'm not telling you what to do. Every family is different. Every situation has nuances I can't see from here. Maybe your parents are redeemable in ways mine weren't. Maybe your siblings can be reached in ways I couldn't reach Chloe for years. But here's what I learned. You don't need anyone else to validate your truth for it to be true. If you're hurting, you're hurting. If you need help, you need help. And if the people who are supposed to love you refuse to see that, that's information about them, not about you. You don't need permission to take care of yourself, not from parents who failed you, not from siblings who dismissed you, not from a family system that made you invisible. And you don't owe your silence to people who built their comfort on your suffering. I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed themselves by building on lies, and then asking me to live inside those lies forever. When I stopped hiding, the foundation cracked. When I got the help I needed, the walls came down. That's not destruction. That's revelation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell the truth, and let the glass fall where it may. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know it was long. I know it was heavy. And I know that some of you recognized pieces of your own life in what I shared. If you've ever been the glass child, the one who was overlooked, dismissed, told that your needs didn't matter, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. Your pain is real, and you don't owe your silence to anyone. If this story resonated with you, leave me a comment. Tell me your experience. I read every single one, and you are not alone. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And check the description for more videos. I think you'll find something that speaks to you there too. I'm Camille, this was my story, and I'm still writing the next chapter.